All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. Um, we can go ahead and get started on this webinar. My name is Gretchen Crow. I'm the Deputy Regional Coordinator, and I manage the Western Visiting Research and Education Grant Program. So this program was previously called the Sabbatical Research and Education Program, so we have revamped it this year. If you are familiar with the sabbatical program, we will go over kind of like what has changed there and what stayed the same. But essentially, it's opened up to a lot more applicants. Um, so throughout this webinar, we're going to talk through the proposal sections, what's expected in each section for this program. And then if you have any questions, you can enter them into the Q&A box, and we will address those at the end of the presentation. So before we get started, just want to start with a quick overview of what SARE is. So SARE is a Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. We are funded by USDA NIFA, and Montana State University serves as the host institution for the Western region. And the Western region, you can see here on this map, includes all those states and protectorates in blue. So if you're located in our region, you are eligible to apply for our grant programs. For this program in particular, the Visiting Research and Education Program, the visiting researcher is allowed to be from anywhere in the world, but the host institution needs to be in our Western US, and we'll get into that more in a few slides. So Western SARE's mission is to promote groundbreaking, innovative ideas in sustainable agriculture. So that can be in enhancing profitability, environmental stewardship, and quality of life for Americans in agriculture. And all of our programs all of our projects really need to highlight both groundbreaking research and education or outreach. Our overall goals are listed in our calls for proposals on page 2, and it's going to be really important that your proposal addresses how your project aims to reach these goals. So overall, we aim to promote good stewardship of natural resources, enhance quality of life of farmers and ranchers, and then surrounding rural communities, protecting the health and safety of those involved in food systems, promoting diversification of crop and livestock enterprises, and then overall examining that economic, social, and environmental implications of adopting and maintaining sustainable ag practices on lands. When we say that we fund innovative and groundbreaking research, we know that innovation means different things to different people. It's going to be really important that in your proposal, you make that case for why your project is innovative. These are some examples of what we've seen at Western SARE that reviewers think are especially innovative. So when we see projects developing a novel sustainable agriculture system that can be implemented in the West and beyond, applying an established sustainable system to a new region or within a new community, solving a regional sustainable problem with a new or creative approach, and developing a creative or novel way of engaging stakeholders in outreach and education. This list is not exhaustive. If you have another innovative idea, these are just some examples to get you thinking about how your project might fit into some of our ideas of innovation here. All right, so before we jump into the details of the Visiting Research and Education Program, so this program was formerly known as a Sabbatical Research and Education Program. So I want to go over what has changed in case there are folks here who have applied for that in the past and want to know like what they're doing this year. So in the past, the Sabbatical Research and Education Program was only available to sabbatical researchers, so typically tenured faculty. And this year, the Visiting Research and Education Program is going to be available to any visiting research or outreach professional. So this includes sabbatical researchers. We still encourage you to apply if you want to use this for your sabbatical or to bring in a sabbatical researcher into the West. But any type of visiting research professional can apply, and we'll go through that more in detail later. In the past, we've had limited options for start dates, and now we have more flexibility in our start dates. So this should help better align across two institutions' timelines, the host institution and the home institution. And then we also had limited options for length of the project. So in the past, you could only do a longer project from 6 months to a year. We're offering now a second option of a shorter project, which would be like 1 month to 6 months. So the Visiting Research and Education Program has 3 project team members at a minimum. So you have the visiting researcher who can come from anywhere in the anywhere in the world. And then you have a host institution researcher that needs to be at a host institution in the Western US. The host institution is going to be like the PI, so they will be the one submitting the grant, but you can work on this in collaboration with the visiting researcher. You also need at least one producer. That should also be from the Western US region, so it should be someone from like the host institution's region. This is at a minimum. You are allowed to have other folks on your project team if it's appropriate. The project length, your project can be anywhere from 1 month to 1 year, and the funding can be up to $75,000. If your project is between 1 month to 6 months, we do cap the budget at $35,000. So, who is eligible to be this visiting researcher? Any extension or research professional from anywhere in the world can be the visiting researcher. Some examples of this can include postdoctoral researchers, non-tenure track research or extension faculty, tenure track researcher or extension faculty, faculty seeking sabbatical leave, other professionals conducting research or extension. The folks who are not eligible for this are graduate students. We do have a separate program for graduate student research and education, so I would encourage them to look into that if you hear them. Who's eligible to be a host? Any institution in the Western US that supports research and education in sustainable agriculture can be a host. So you would have a researcher be the PI at that institution. The institution needs to be able and qualified to receive funds from the US government and has demonstrated fiscal responsibility. If you have like issues with those parts, if you think your institution might have issues with those parts, you can reach out to us and we will see if we can make any accommodations or anything, but just let us know if that becomes an issue. So the host responsibilities are going to be serving as the PI on the project, and so that is the person who's also going to submit the project. Develop research and education plan with the visiting researcher. So this is a collaborative project, it can be. And engaging with people and producers from the host institution region. And then with the visiting researcher, the host and the visiting researcher will carry out all the contracted objectives of the project. And then finally, who is eligible to be a collaborating producer? So for our producers, you need to have a primary occupation is farming or ranching and have a farm ranch taxpayer identification number. And then a part-time producer would need at least $1,000 of documented annual income from farming or ranching. There is an equivalent here where circumstances are where food is not sold for profit, like if you have cultural or indigenous farming operations. Okay, so we're going to talk about the documentation that you need to prove that, one, you've been invited to be a visiting researcher, and two, that the visiting researcher's home institution is okay with them leaving for an extended period of time. So first, you need to provide, all applications need to provide a host institution letter of invitation. It needs to include the scope of work that is being put together, a period of time that the visiting researcher is invited, so that specific period of time, how the project will benefit the host institution and regional partners, so these are the folks in the Western US, the importance of the research and education activities to be conducted, the resources committed by the host institution already for the project, so again, the institution in the Western US, and then if there are collaboration plans beyond the completion of the project, and then reiterating the total funds requested. And you're allowed to put any additional information in here that might be relevant. For the second part of the documentation needed, all of these applications need to include a letter of support from the home institution, department head, or your equivalent. So probably like the supervisor, the current supervisor of the visiting researcher. This letter needs to indicate approval and support for the extended leave for the visiting researcher during that project timeline. So if you are not seeking a sabbatical, and not seeking a sabbatical or using this funding for a sabbatical, your department head letter needs to acknowledge the visiting researcher's time request for the proposed visit to the host institution is going to be honored if the award is made. Acknowledge that they're eligible to make this visit to the host institution, and then state how the visiting researcher's expertise will make an impact while they are at the host institution in the Western US, and then what would they benefit from, what would the visiting researcher benefit from doing this visit. So what is that two-way street of knowledge that's going back and forth? If you are applying to this program to fund part of your faculty sabbatical leave, so you also have to go through a sabbatical leave process at your home institution. This letter looks a little bit different because we know that that process may not be completed or even started at the time of your application. So for faculty who are using this for sabbatical leave, your letter needs to state how the visiting researcher's expertise will make an impact during their visit to the host institution. So what are they bringing to the Western US that will make that impact? It needs to acknowledge that the faculty is eligible for sabbatical leave and that the department is aware of the exact dates being proposed. And then it needs to outline that department's sabbatical leave process, including the date by which the sabbatical leave will be either approved or denied. And then it can also include anything else that is relevant there. If you are seeking sabbatical leave and using this grant program to fund part of that, so after you submit that letter with your application and your application gets reviewed, if your application is chosen to be funded by our technical review panel and our administrative council, then when the award notification is sent to you, the program manager will ask you for any updates on your sabbatical leave application with your home institution. So if the decision has been made at that time, you can send your proof of your sabbatical approval at that time. If it hasn't been made at that time, you can just give an update on when that approval is going to be coming, or like that you've submitted your application package to the department and you're waiting to hear back or something like that. Then 1 month before your start date, the program manager is going to reach out again, that's me, and ask you for proof that your sabbatical has been approved. So at least by 1 month before your start date, we need to know that your sabbatical has been approved by your department. If you find out earlier than that, between getting the award and 1 month before this project start date, you can just reach out and give us that proof as soon as possible. But we do need to know that that has been approved to actually disperse the funds. Okay, so let's talk about the timeline. The Visiting Research and Education Program, we're now offering 2 different lengths of visits for you to consider. So if you want a shorter visit, you can apply for a mini visit. This would be between 1 and 6 months. The maximum allowable budget here for your whole project would be $35,000. If you want to do a longer visit, between 6 months to 1 year, that maximum allowable budget would be $75,000. And you're going to choose the length of project when you go to apply in the grant management system. So let's talk through the specific parts of the proposal, and then we'll walk through them more in detail. So all of our programs have 6 parts. And they're all submitted through the grant management system that we have through SARE. So each of these parts is going to have a corresponding section on that grant management system when you go to submit a proposal. The basic requirements are going to be like, if you're reading the CFP, who is the host? The host is going to be, sorry, who is the PI? The host is going to be the PI. Is your visit a mini visit? Is it a long visit? Things like that. Your proposal basic information then is going to include things like the subject matter, the objectives, commodities, starting, ending dates, project team. And then you have a summary, which is limited to about 200 words. It goes briefly over your research methods and educational outcomes. And then the narrative. This is the biggest part of our grants. You're going to be putting the problem, solution, what your collaboration with the host institution and local partners looks like, the research and educational methods, your overall timeline, how you're going to disseminate outcomes, and your impact on the human capacity at the host institution. And then you'll have your budget and budget justification. So you'll list your expenses and justify them. And then we have all of your supporting documents. So this includes those letters I just talked about, CVs, current and pending support. You'll also need a letter of producer cooperation. And then if you need like instant IRB or IACUC approval, that will also go there. Okay, so hopefully you have at least glanced at the calls for proposals. I know this webinar is pretty quick after they were posted, but you can always go back and find them on our webpage at westernsare.org/grants, and there's a visiting research and education page there. So for the proposal narrative, you are scored by reviewers on each of these sections, and the parentheses that you see here next to each section are the weight of that score. So relevance to sustainable agriculture, it's going to be 15% of your total score. So we're going to walk through what goes into each of these sections, and I'll give you some tips of like what we've heard from reviewers that they're really looking for as we do that. So in terms of the relevance to sustainable agriculture, this is really where you're answering that question of why is this project necessary? What problems is your project addressing? So in this section, it's really important to cite evidence of that need. Could be reports, previous studies, needs assessments, lived experience, like if you have anecdotal evidence from producers that you've talked to. But a big tip is use our SARE resources. Our reviewers like to see that people have looked at the SARE database and used like what has been out there. All of our reports from our projects that have been completed are public on the SARE database, so you can see like has somebody done something similar, or can you build on something that someone else has done there. And then in this section, you're also going to want to answer the question, what are the potential benefits to agriculture and rural communities? So you can point out, soil and water quality, ecosystem services, human health, anything else that you can think of how your project is meeting, these dimensions of sustainability. So our social dimension would be like quality of life. Environmental is that ecosystem services type thing, and then economic, so including like cost benefit analysis, productivity levels. If you can use numerical estimates in this part, it is very helpful to reviewers. They like to see numbers. Obviously there's also qualitative data out there that is well-founded, but we hear a lot from reviewers who like to see numerical estimates. If you are looking for numerical estimates of some of these things, there's a lot of publicly available data from USDA, National Agriculture Statistics Service, who puts out the Census of Ag, and the Economic Research Service, who does like yearly updates on different commodities. So just a tip to look there. Okay, so our next section is collaboration with the host institution and local partners. So here, how is your project going to impact the local agricultural stakeholders and address knowledge gaps at that host institution in the Western US? Here would be a great place to include evidence of support. Letters of support, our reviewers love to see letters of support. So if you can have producer groups or commodity groups within the Western region showing that or saying that your project could really make a difference in sustainable agriculture, that's really highly valued by our reviewers. You can also reference studies or reports or needs assessments that show that this project is potentially filling a gap in knowledge in the Western US. If you are looking to get support from external stakeholders, it's really important to share your ideas early. It can take time to get people to buy into these ideas and then to get support letters. You can also use our SARE resources database, which we will look at in a minute. Okay, and then our next section is the Visiting Research and Education Project Team. Again, you have to have at least 3 people on your project team. The host principal investigator, who needs to be located in the Western US. The visiting researcher, who can come from anywhere in the world and can be a co-PI on your project. And then your host, your producer cooperator that needs to be from the host region. In this section, you need to describe how each team member is going to be involved throughout the project. Really important in Western SARE projects is that the producer is actively engaged throughout the project, has some sort of role throughout the project. If you do want to include additional members on your team, that is totally fine. You're welcome to include as many team members as you want. You just need to be able to explain their role very clearly in the project team. Okay, so the next section is the research plan. This is one of the biggest, the highest weighted sections at 30% of your total score. And so here is where you're really going to identify your research objectives, what you want to achieve, and how you're going to achieve them through your methods. It is highly encouraged and required that your objectives are SMART, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And this is definitely something that reviewers will look for when they're reviewing your proposal. And then you're also going to go into your materials and methods for each objective here. So what you're going to do, what materials you're going to use to do it, any project sites, research design, data collection, and analysis should all be included here. Again, if you have project sites that are require some sort of support or collaboration from that project site, having a letter showing that support would be highly valuable to reviewers. So some tips here: try to avoid the use of jargons and define all of your acronyms. We have a very diverse array of reviewers from all different types of commodities, all different types of agricultural backgrounds, from producers to scientists. So just make sure that you're defining what you're talking about and being very clear about what you're talking about. And then another thing that comes up a lot is try to avoid your objectives being dependent on each other, or if they are dependent, reviewers like to see a contingency plan in case something goes wrong, so that they know that your objectives, that your project will still result in some success. We also have a lot of documents and resources on our website that can help with crafting proposals and other tips for applying. Okay, the second part of the narrative is, or the big part of the narrative is the education plan, which again accounts for 30% of your total score. So this is where you're going to write your education objectives and methods. So you want to indicate who's your audience, what you want to achieve, the number of participants that you're trying to bring in. And again, these methods and objectives need to be written in that SMART format. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Some tips here. Try to have multiple ways of doing outreach. So you could have fact sheets, articles, videos, field days, workshops. Our reviewers do like to see different types of educational outcomes and multiple communication styles. If you are not sure where to go to do outreach in agriculture, you could partner with different stakeholders, so producers, NRCS, other conservation districts, soil and water districts. There's a lot of folks out there that do a lot of this outreach to the broader agriculture communities and regions, and so they are always good starting points to see if you could team up with them. So here we have also some materials to help you in identifying and conducting successful outreach activities. This is on our website, tips for conducting outreach. And there's some best practices for adult learning, field day toolkit. Please use this as a resource as you're writing your grant so that you can bolster that education plan. All right, we have the timeline next. And this counts for 5% of your total score. You're going to use the timeline to outline when you plan to accomplish the activities for each objective. You can depict your timeline in a variety of ways, make sure that reviewers can understand it, and that it's easy to follow your proposed activities. So one method is you can include a table using an online editor. You may also be familiar with Gantt charts shown here. There are templates available online for this. Google Sheets, for instance, has one of those. Okay, and then the budget and the budget justification. So there are budget categories that are allowed under this grant program are listed here. There are more information about all of this in the calls for proposal and on our website. And for the justification, you're going to need to explain why the budget items are necessary for your project to be successful. You can also think of this as explaining your math. Why did you break down your budget like that? Reviewers are going to look that your budget aligns with your research objectives and educational objectives. So that's where that last 5% or that next 5% is coming from. They're not necessarily scrutinizing you on the specifics of your budget, but that they align with your outreach and research objectives. All right, important this year, new this year, is for sabbatical researchers. So this year you can budget in salary for the visiting researcher. For sabbatical researchers though, your salary plus the salary that your home institution is offering you cannot exceed 100% of your regular 12-month salary. So for example, if you're going on a year-long sabbatical and using this application to try to fund that, if your home institution provides you 6 months of salary, you can only ask for an additional 6 months of salary. Obviously, the whole thing can't exceed that $75,000 max. But if you have questions about this, please reach out. All right, the final part of the Visiting Research and Education Grant is the building human capacity at the host institution. So this is your last 5%. This is where you're answering the questions: how will the expected knowledge gain and educational outcomes improve the research and education capacity at the host institution? What are the expected connections and collaborations between the host institution and home institution, so where the visiting scholar is coming from? And then how will basically the team members of this project interact after the completion of this project? So are there plans for continued interactions, continued exchange of knowledge? This would all be put here. Okay. So after the narrative sections, you do have supporting documents that you need to include. So we've talked about the letter of support from the home institution or department head. This is the one saying that the visiting scholar is eligible for this visit. If you're going on a sabbatical, outlines the sabbatical process. You have to have that letter of invitation from the host, so saying that the host has invited the visiting scholar, that the visiting scholar or knows the dates of the visiting of the visit. And then you need to have a letter of collaboration from every producer that's on your project. So you're only required to have one producer on these projects. If you have 3, you need 3 letters of collaboration from that producer. That letter needs to indicate their willingness to participate and their role in the project. And then letters of support. So this is any letters from individuals, organizations that are supporting different aspects of the project. So again, these are really important to reviewers in assessing the need of the project. but also if you have like a site visit, or if you have a project site that's maybe like an ARS site or an experiment station, having a letter of support from them would be good to include so that reviewers know you have permission to have your site there. Letters should show genuine involvement, cooperation, support, and enthusiasm for your project. So I would say the more personal the letter about the project, reviewers get really excited about that. Supporting documents in terms of animal welfare and assurance. So if your project needs, has vertebrate animals that are included in it, and you need to have access to IACUC review through a university, please include that documentation. Montana State University is able to help for folks who do not have access to an IACUC review board. If the host institution is a university, they likely already have that. So you'll have to just link your animal care plan on there. And then same thing for IRB. So if you need IRB, if you don't have access to an IRB for research with human subjects, so if you're doing like surveys, questionnaires, audio or visual recordings, and you need IRB approval and you don't have access to it, there is a spot to tell us that, and we can help you with that if your grant is chosen for funding. All right, let's go through some Western SARE resources that are available to you as you're writing your grant. So first, we have our Western SARE project database. You'll see that you can do searches on here. They can be very general or they can be very narrow by keyword. So you can also narrow down by searching within a specific region or specific year, even can go as far as specific state. You can use these practice and commodities lists as well to even narrow things down even further along with your keyword. If you do a sample keyword search of organic matter, and I limited this search to projects since 2020, you can see that we have 293 projects in the Western region that deal with organic matter. You're able to click through these projects and see any project reports that are available if the project has been finalized. There you can see like what data was collected, what the conclusions of the project were, and what recommendations they have for future research in this area. So some of that can be helpful in crafting your like relevance part of your project and looking to see what SARE has already funded. Back on our main webpage, we have resources for learning. And there's a bunch of, there's like basically a library from our website here. So this page has publications that share results from our other projects, as well as resources to help you in writing your grant. And then when you go to actually submit a proposal, if you've decided that this is the program for you, or maybe one of our other programs is for you, you're going to need to access the SARE grant management system. So that is at projects.sare.org to complete your proposal. So here's what the landing page looks like. You can access this from our database. You can access the SARE database here as well in the search projects part. You can go ahead and create an account if you don't have one, or log in if you do have one. And there's also an option to reset your password if you've just forgotten it. And then you'll be able to pick from there what grant you want to apply for it from, and it'll open up that application portal. Okay, on our website too, we have a tutorial to walk through our proposal submission process on that grant management system. So if this is your first time, especially, I would suggest looking at this so that it's easy to walk through when you're going to submit your proposal. It is different. We don't accept like PDFs of your proposal text. Like all the text needs to be added into a separate text box. So it's a little bit different than other grants you might have applied for in the past. If you need a refresher, it's also up there. And you're also welcome to reach out if you're having any issues with anything. I do want to remind everybody, it might take longer than you think to input your proposal into our grant management system. Make sure you're saving every save a lot. Save every time you think about it because we don't want you to lose your data. And don't wait until the last moment to start putting your information into your application because it takes longer than you might think, and we don't want the system to time out on you or like after the application deadline. Finally, when you're doing your budget, we do have a budget form that is linked in the GMS and in the call for proposal. You do have to use this 2027 Western SARE budget workbook. And then your budget justification needs to follow the budget categories that are outlined here and in the CFP. You do need to name your authorized representative from your institution, but just you are not required to include additional funding sources. We do remind our reviewers that they're not reviewing you based on extra funding you might have as well. So you don't need to include extra funding sources that you might have to support this project. Just an important note, a reminder that Western SARE is a USDA program. All proposals that we fund, all projects that we fund have to adhere to current USDA guidelines. If you want more information on those guidelines, you can see the Secretary's Memorandum 1078020 for current research priorities. And then also all of our funding decisions are contingent on USDA's review of the proposed proposals to fund. And then also this year, our ability to fund the proposals that you submit is contingent on USDA providing us with our funding. So I do want to make that clear that we are opening these calls for proposals so we're ready when we have that funding available, but we may not have that funding available soon. Okay, so finally, some important dates. These proposals for the Visiting Research and Education Program are due October 5th at noon Mountain Standard Time. We are going to have a technical review panel convene in November of 2026. We will do our proposal selection with our administrative council in December of 2026, so that we hope to get awards made before the earliest project start date, which is January 1st of 2027. So for the project start date, you can choose any first of the month in the year of 2027. So I would, especially for folks who are needing sabbatical leave approved, remember that you're going to need to have approval of that sabbatical at least 1 month before this project would start. So keep that in mind when you're picking your start date. And I think I did not mention this, but these projects are for 1 year. So up to 1 year, you can, yeah. Okay, so I am happy to take any questions right now in the Q&A. Also, if you have questions that come up after this, as you're working through deciding if you want to apply, or if you've decided you want to apply and have more questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions. You can reach out to me at my phone number. My email here is gkroh@sare.org. And this is our program email for this program, wsare-sab@sare.org. Yeah, so thank you, and I will take questions.